Oh my God, it's like Fashion Week. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I am Paula Cuneo, and I am a proud co-founder of Oculus VR for Good. We know that VR defies distance and circumstance to connect the people that we know and love, to create and explore and engage. I think one of the things that we don't talk about a lot is how VR connects us to people that we don't know yet, people that we don't understand yet, people we don't yet love. And I gotta say, there's a lot of love on this stage today, and VR connected us. So we will be very much authentically ourselves today, and it should be a really interesting discussion. Before I introduce the panelists, though, I wanted to talk about our origin story. We all met in Creators Lab about a year and a half ago, when the Fovrth Studio and Pride Foundation were connected through Oculus to explore how VR could tell the stories of the LGBTQ community. I think we've got some Creators Lab folks in the house today. Can I get a you? Growing community, right? Creators Lab was started in 2016 when we knew that we found something in VR that was very powerful. And we decided that we would use that power to elevate the people and the stories that were important to us. We believe very much that VR storytelling is rooted, its power is really rooted in the connection between the viewer and the people in that story. That really delivers the power that VR was made to do. I think we all believe that VR storytelling is a force for good, and I was gonna just show you guys our story. And there should be audio.
Challenges, especially the transgender community faces, is that a lot of people just don't think that they know a transgender person. So I think one of the greatest things that we can do is increase visibility.
Authentically Us is a VR project made with Oculus's Creators Lab and the Pride Foundation. It's a series of films created for audiences to possibly meet for the first time a transgender person. There still is an enormous amount of discrimination that goes on. The central thesis of each film looks to create awareness that transgender people have always been here, can live anywhere, and can work anywhere.
One of the most powerful, if you will, tools I have in my toolkit is my story. In all, I spent almost 12 years in the United States Air Force. After an amount of time and a lot of struggle, I chose to embrace my truth and to be brave. VR allows the person to be immersed in the experience. You get to walk next to me. When I'm at the Capitol, you get to go to work with me. You get to see a human being. I have an amazing opportunity to bring my truth to the world so that other people might have the courage to bring theirs. When I talked to folks that saw the films, and I saw that little shine in their eye, and you see their mind change, I think that's the most rewarding feeling I've ever felt.
As a creator, it's don't tell, show. With virtual reality, it's don't show, bring. Bring them to where the story is.
When advocates are lobbying elected officials on issues relating to transgender rights, they should let the elected officials watch that film. I think a lot of hearts could be changed and public policy could be changed.
I think change can happen through policy. I think change can happen through culture, but it starts with one person. It starts with one person opening themselves up to the opportunity for change.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Jeremiah Allen, Jesse Ayala, and Shannon Scott. We're going to just tell some stories today, but I have to start with, how cool was it to see your face on the keynote stage behind Zuckerberg.
Oh, how cool is that? Like, how often do you get to be on stage? And this counts. I was on stage with Mark Zuckerberg. I'm like, come on, that's like pretty rad, right? I was pretty freaking stoked.
It's pretty cool. I think that this trailer is a beautiful introduction to the whole series of films, but I think it doesn't really scratch the surface of your own personal story. Do you want to tell everybody a little bit more about yourself and your story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Shannon Scott. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I identify as a transgender woman. I identify as woman, but my journey was a little bit different than most, obviously, coming into my femininity. I started out my life in a way that you might not guess. I grew up out in rural Montana, working on a ranch, and doing all of the things that you would expect somebody to do working on a ranch. I mean, like, literally, I was out there riding horses and branding cattle and fixing fence. And so, I mean, you can imagine that that was a pretty rough and tough environment. It really was. I mean, I literally grew up with cowboys. And I mean, like, Copenhagen dipping, Coors Light drinking, pickup truck driving, real live cowboys. And it was a tough crowd, and it was not somewhere that was really safe for me. Both emotionally, physically, you name it, I couldn't be who I was there. And at a very young age, I was struggling with my gender identity, and I had to keep it hidden for a very, very long time because socially, I just couldn't be out. So I went through that incredibly affirming, confidence-building, emotionally stabilizing place in our life we know as high school. And I was struggling so much with who I was. It became to the point where it's like, I had to do something. I couldn't just pretend it wasn't there anymore. And so I did what most people in Montana do, and in my family especially, is shove those feelings way deep down and do something contrary. And so I decided to join the United States military. And when everybody else was off on their senior kegers and their senior trips, I was on an airplane off to San Antonio, Texas, to basic military training. And in all, I spent just under 12 years in the United States military. And I'm not going to lie for 1 second. I miss it, and I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, has anybody here ever served, actually?
Got some vets?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, for those of you who haven't, let me tell you a little bit about what it's like to fly on military transport. This is a story I love to tell because it was something that happened at the end of a trip when I got on a military plane that would change my life. I got on this plane, and for those who haven't been on a plane before, it's just like every other giant plane. You have a giant aluminum tube, and you have these everything from tip to tail filling this plane that you would need to fight a war. It could have been a jet engine or a Humvee or a case of missiles or these giant mixed-rate boxes that those of you in the military we know as Connexes. These giant containers that just had anything in them. You never knew what was in them. And so it was a scene that I got very familiar with. And I remember when we were leaving Balad Air Base in central Iraq on my second tour, I got on the plane and I saw the very familiar Connexes. Got on, didn't think much of it, but these ones were different. And as we made our combat ascent out of the area of responsibility, I remember thinking, these boxes are different. These ones are stainless steel. They're not military green. And I called the loadmaster over once we got to a safe cruising altitude, and I said, over the roar of the propellers, I said to the loadmaster, what is in these containers? And he looked back at me. And he said, HR. HR. Human remains. And, I spent the next several hours of my life staring at the people who had given the ultimate sacrifice, a plane full of dead soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines. And I decided that at that moment in my life, I wasn't going to hide who I was any longer. And, thank you. And I went home and I started the journey. I found a great therapist. After some really good therapists and building a good, strong support network, I started hormone replacement therapy, and then eventually I was outed to my coworkers. I was still living what I would think of as like a dual life, trying to appear as masculine as possible in the military, but still trying to live authentically in my own time. And then one day my boss called me into his office on a Monday morning, and I knew exactly what he wanted to talk about. He sat me down, and he had 2 pieces of paper in front of him, and he slid one across the table, and it was the UCMJ, the United States Code of Military Justice, which is basically the law of the land in the military, and he pointed out where it was unlawful to be a transgender person. And then he slid another piece of paper across the table, and it was my dishonorable discharge. And after nearly 12 years of service and, all of the decorations, basic military training honor graduate, member of the honor guard, and for those of you who don't know what that is, if you've ever seen the rifle salute at a funeral or the draping of a flag over a coffin, that's the honor guard. It was completely volunteer, but I loved it that much. I was a meritorious service medal recipient. I mean, I gave everything to it, and then to be rejected for something that I saw as being so courageous and so authentic, I felt betrayed. And it hurt, and it still hurts. And so after a period of time, and a lot of struggle and some really dark days, I decided to leave. And I was very lucky to avoid a dishonorable discharge because I found a job in Portland, Oregon, where I was able to move and live authentically. And I found my strength, and I found my power, and I found my purpose. And so now I take that passion, and that drive, and that determination, and I give it to this. And that's why I'm on this stage here today. And I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for coming here today and supporting this work, because we're going to change some lives.
Thank you. And we talk about co-creation a lot, and we've had this conversation many times. And I think, Jeremiah, it would be great to hear how you feel, as someone both, behind the camera and really a part of the creative process. Mm-hmm. How important is your story? And do you want to talk about how you started working in trans rights?
Yeah, so I feel like trans rights kind of came to me and told me I was going to be doing this type of work, but I actually came out later in life after I'd already been married and had 3 kids. And after my divorce, I decided to go back to school to pursue a career in medicine. And it was at my time at Oregon State University where I came out. And the institution, in several institutions throughout my life, but particularly the university just wasn't set up to support a student like me. The faculty and administrators didn't have the tools or the language to talk about me, and so I really had to advocate for inclusive policies in order for myself and other students to just be on campus and pursue our education. And it just kind of continued, and through that experience kind of changed a lot. And so I changed what I was studying. Instead of studying medicine, to study law. And I ended up going to New Mexico to start a law program after I graduated. And when I got down there within the first semester, I decided this is the time where, I'm down here in New Mexico, I'm gonna start my medical transition. And so I spoke with the project, my programs director, and told her I was gonna start transitioning, and she told me absolutely not. She said that I could either take a deferment for a year and transition and then come back, or I could continue to study law. And if I was going to do that, then she wasn't going to support my decision to start transitioning. And so I told her, okay, I'll just continue with this program, but ultimately decided to leave early. And so I came back to Seattle, Washington, and started a master's program, and I started interning with the local city government doing parking policy, because I really enjoy policy. But I started doing parking policy, and it was
Thank
during...
you for your service.
Of course, if anyone wants to talk about concrete, I'm the person. But I started when I was with the city to start my medical transition. And again, and even in a place like Seattle that's really liberal and for the most part really supportive and inclusive, the city also did not have policies in place for a transitioning employee. And so despite the fact that my supervisors and departments and everyone was like really supportive and wanting to help, they just didn't have the policies in place. And so I had to work with the city as well as with Pride Foundation in order to create trans-inclusive policies for transitioning employees, as well as during that time urge the previous mayor to then have a citywide ordinance where all bathrooms within Seattle that are single stall will then be gender inclusive. And so it was through that work, thank you, through that work where Pride Foundation was like, you know, we got to collaborate with you on this amazing work with the city. Will you come work with us and continue this work? And so that's how I started in my current position now. And so I think that advocacy is a huge part, our storytelling is a huge part of advocacy. And so to be able to bring those skills along to this project has just been amazing.
So let's talk a little bit, Let's talk a little bit about Authentically Us. Jesse, do you want to talk about the casting process and how you chose 3 people to highlight?
Yes. So thank you, Jeremiah, Shannon, and Paula. We started on this journey last year, and Jeremiah and I we kind of went on a first date in some ways, where we, like a blind first date, where we met each other, learned about each other, and through that process learned what the story was that we wanted to tell. And for Jeremiah, he said Pride Foundation is one organization in the country, in the world, that is really looking at how can we make it so that other people all over the world can see transgender people simply as people, deserving of rights and equality. And for me, that was like a shocking low bar, and I was baffled by that's where we are in 2018 or 2017. And he's like, that is where we are. With the work that he does every day at Transform Washington and at Pride, illuminates that that is still where we are. And so we started on a journey to figure out how we could use virtual reality to tell individual stories, but also to get people to start to see trans people as human and deserving of rights. So that's been like our goal throughout this process. So we came up with a few ways in which we wanted to tell that story. The first way we kind of developed was a prototype that looked at the idea of embodiment, which I think is a thing that is very common in VR for people to try to create embodiment experiences. And our first jab at it was, maybe we can have the person feel like a transgender person, but getting them to feel that way was through seeing them be authentically discriminated against. And we did a very rough prototype of that, and we were like, that is not the way we're going to get people to see these people in the way that we need them to see them. And so we went back to the drawing board, and we're like, let's find human stories, and let's bring audiences into those people's worlds. Let's see the diversity of the trans community, the intersectionality of it, and the geographic and, you know, people from every corner of this country. And so we set out on this journey to find people. And originally we were like, we'll do 7 people, and then we were like, let's be more realistic, let's do 3. And so we set out on this giant casting call. And over the course of about a month and a half, we interviewed 100 people. People emailed us responses to questions, but also gave us a minute-long video. And I don't know if you've ever applied for anything, but trying to describe your story in a minute on a video on an iPhone isn't always like that easy. And what came out of that was we found 3 very incredible individuals who we could see immediately weren't performing for us, but were giving us their authentic story and bringing us in, even in that minute, to the world in which we were soon going to dive headfirst into. And so we found 3 people. The first is Aiden Crawford. They're a Native American person who lives in Boise, Idaho, and is Two-Spirit. And Two-Spirit is a Native identity that is not on the gender binary, not male, not female, but they believe that both of those identities inform how they have a role in society. And in talking with Aiden in all of the interviews, I found very quickly that his story really is telling a story that trans people have been here since the dawn of time and will continue to be here. And that what he does as an individual, he is an activist in a lot of ways, but what he does as an individual is prove to all of us that this isn't a trend, this isn't a hashtag, this is something that is part of all of our communities. Shannon, similarly, was somebody who we came across, and I remember watching the video that you sent, and it was Shannon just walking around on a Friday night, like pacing around her living room, and just being like, "Hi, I'm Shannon," and just delivering authenticity immediately. And I flagged that one immediately, and I was like, Jeremiah, we have to follow up with this person immediately. There's no way we can make a project without this person. And Shannon's story is about veterans and service to America, but it's really about workplace equality. If you think about it, the military is a workplace. And what Shannon does and what Shannon's story does is tells us that trans people should be allowed to work anywhere regardless of their identity. Like, why do we live in a period of time where that's okay to discriminate against somebody and possibly lose their job because of that? And the work that Shannon does outside of her work as an FAA person is really advocating that on the ground level. And our final person was Acton. And Acton was this unicorn that we found as well. He lives in rural Montana, loves to wear flannel, and fixes things, like builds and fixes things. And for him, in our conversations with him, we were asking him, what is it about you that is extraordinary? Because I think oftentimes you want to reach and find this person that does all these things. And with Acton, it was he just is. He's not performing. He's not living this lavish lifestyle on Instagram or anything. Hashtag Instagram. But he is just a normal person. And for us, that was so wonderful to just be able to capture this person's story of finding himself and also finding community in a place that we generally don't think of as being so open to trans people or LGBTQ people. So in a nutshell, that's how we found all the three of the characters.
Sounds like a blast to going through. I was really surprised at how many people actually applied when we talked through.
We were shocked as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. Why, Jeremiah, why now? Why is the trans rights discussion so important right now?
Yeah, I think that talking about trans rights and particularly storytelling in media is because media really influences a lot of different aspects of society, and particularly public policy and the disenfranchisement of certain communities. And with transgender folks, we within the past several years have faced a backlash of several anti-trans legislation and ballot initiatives in several states. With the current administration, they rolled back the federal guidance on transgender students and youth, the trans military bans, and the past several years, every year, the murder rate for transgender folks continue to rise. And so, it's really important that transgender folks are able to tell their stories and to be a part of media, because the misconception is that transgender people don't exist. And so being able to have these stories and show the diversity is super important. And I think in particular with our project, what was important was that transgender people weren't just the subjects of the stories, but they were also a part of creating the stories. And so I think that was really important to have authentic stories being told of transgender folks.
And how's Pride Foundation using this content?
Within this past summer, we were able to take the headsets along with us for all of the different Pride events that we've done. And so we were able to set up booths, and when people were enjoying the festivities, put on the headset, view the stories, as well as we've been able to show the films at several different film festivals. And every time Pride Foundation has an event, we take the films. And one of the things that we are doing at the film festivals and have continued to do at Pride Foundation's events is postcards. And so after people put on the headsets, view the content, they're then able to write postcards to the federal congressmen and senators in order for them to support transgender rights. And so we've been using it that way. And in the future, one of the things that we really want to use the headsets for is like what was shown in the video, is in our lobbying and advocacy efforts with policymakers. And so right now we're looking into how to create how to create that tool. So when we do lobbying with our constituents this January, that we're able to take the headsets along with us.
And Shannon, I remember at Tribeca, you saw this piece for the first time in VR. How did that feel?
You know, it was interesting because I thought that I knew what I would see. You know, I was there for the entire time, obviously. And I thought, oh, I know how this is going to go down. And then I watched it, and like I'm crying, and like, but I was there. Like I've seen this all before, but it was like Jesse and his amazing team put this together in such a way that was so emotionally compelling to me that I still can't watch it and not cry. I watched it yesterday, and I cried. So I would like y'all to like not underestimate just how powerful this medium is and how it can elicit emotion and change. But for me, seeing it the first time was, I was honestly impressed at the amazing story.
Thank you.
No, I really was. I didn't know you could take everything that we had and then put it together in such an amazing, powerful, impactful piece.
And you said we've talked about the question why VR, and my favorite answer is always, you always look at me and go like, why not VR?
Like Paula, stop asking that question.
but I do feel like there are a couple of examples where you go, VR really made a difference, and a lot of that is about the environments that you create, sort of despite yourself almost, because it really captures the reality of people's lived experience. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I think we treated each of their environments as part of their a character in the cast, like because it was so important to bring audiences to see the normalcy of everybody's lives. Mm-hmm. Like we wanted to bring you in their homes, in their cars, in their intimate spaces, in places where they have community, and showcase that they were interacting with people. I mean, in Shannon's piece, you see her marching up to Capitol Hill, someplace that is pretty exotic to a lot of Americans, intimidating, but you see Shannon marching up and talking to senators and asking them to take a stand for trans rights. You also see her coming back to Portland and connecting with the LGBTQ veteran community there. So you, in so many ways, start to see how many layers of community she's interacting with and how she's become, in a lot of ways, a conduit for their voice to Washington. I think one of the most touching scenes that we filmed with Shannon was at the Congressional Cemetery, where you're brought up to when we scouted this, it was like, okay, there's going to be one LGBTQ headstone there, and it's going to say something that's moving. And we went and scouted it, and my team was like, there's not one, there's so many. And these people from wars from the past, you see the bravery, I think Shannon said this at one point in time, the bravery and courage of them to write on their tombstone, proud gay veteran. And in a country that they can get discharged. And one of the headstones says, the military gave me a medal for killing a man and discharged me for loving one. And I think that scene, seeing Shannon go into that space, we prepped her a little bit, but we're like, just go into this space and interact as you want, and pay your respects to these people that have paved the way in so many ways for you as an individual in the military and as a trans person in 2018 to get where you are. And I think that building that environment was really important for us to kind of showcase that.
When you guys film, and you see it in the trailer, that there's this big black circular ball that's the camera, right? It seems a little sort of very Death Star. Did you find it intimidating that it was there?
No.
What's it like to be sort of the star of a VR?
No, for me it wasn't intimidating at all. I had been executing, and just honestly in the beginning stages of understanding just how powerful connecting, via this great landscape we have. We call it whatever you want, the internet, the metaverse, whatever it is that we're referring to it as. So I had been in front of the camera before, and so at this point, I wasn't intimidated by it. I just wanted to be respectful to the medium because it was brand new to me, and so I did need some direction as far as like, where do I look, where do I not look, what do I do, what do I not do?
Don't cross that stitch line.
Yeah, things that I would never ever know, and so but I wasn't intimidated. I just, I knew I had a great team, and I had some great direction.
Is there the meta question, like when we talk to game developers and co-creators in the audience, Jesse, how do you feel about creating content, for social impact, and how does that how does that inform your work broadly? Is that all you do? And how does that sort of seep into what your daily experience is like as a creator?
So most of the content that I create at my company, Fovrth Studios, really touches on social issues. It's more and more becoming social issues that are multi-generational, that are a little larger than one person solving. And I think that that's what makes compelling content, because we want to bring you into this very, not necessarily complex, but something that has a lot of social value and we can help change in some way. On this project, I think what was so interesting to me was that from the get-go, we were collaborating with the LGBTQ community. From Jeremiah to you two, to the team at Facebook and Oculus, to the team at Pride. That is a rarity for me as a creator, to have upwards of 80% of our team be people of color, LGBTQ people, and women.
Yeah.
And that was a great working environment. I think we got a lot of different insights and inputs from different members of our community. But also, I think what was so interesting in working with Pride was that oftentimes when you work with a client or somebody who's paying you to do something, you feel like you're kind of chained to what they want to do. With Pride, it was not the case at all. It was actually a partnership, and I think part of that was developed out of me seeing Pride as the experts that can help craft this story in a way that can be compelling, that can achieve the goals that we wanted to achieve with it. And I think that was so pivotal in how we created this project.
And it was really brave, right? Like for Pride Foundation, not having done any VR work before, to be able to step in and go, we've done a lot of great digital work. You guys tell incredible stories. I mean, I think Transform Washington is a great example of how you've really normalized the trans community up in Washington. Was it hard to give feedback to a VR director? Because you guys had a little spicy for a while.
No, I don't think it was hard. I think that...
Let's get real.
I think that it was really important that we, set a space to have those really difficult conversations. I remember the first time when I was going to give Jesse some feedback, and we were on a call, and I was like, "So, how do you like to receive criticism?"
And I'm like pacing at a conference and like, just give it to me, just
give it to me. But I think that was really important because, in order to do these type of social change work, when we're dealing with people's lives and we're dealing with issues that are, especially right now in this current political climate, it was important that we were having these conversations and really thinking not only about the content and what we were creating, but like any potential backlash or that it could possibly have. And Pride Foundation and the work that we do at Transform Washington does a lot of polling and research around messaging and media that is out there currently around transgender folks. And so it was really important to have those really conversations. And I think that like having those conversations is really what made this project what it was. And so I don't feel like it was difficult. Jesse's like, just give it to me. And I'm like, okay, sure. And we did.
But I think from my perspective, it made it so much more efficient. Like if you're withholding how you actually feel about this project, it's just going to snowball into something. And I think we created a rapport that was really open, and that's a rarity for a lot of like client-partner relationships. So thank you, Jeremiah.
You're welcome.
There's so much love, yeah. And it's interesting because I think, Jeremiah, you and I connect, at least I feel like you and I connect as parents, more than part of the LGBTQ community. We're always talking about our kids. Like the experience of working together created such strong, important relationships that have completely transformed my life and how I sort of, how I'm raising my kids and how I'm working in the creative space. So it is interesting that, not only does the VR experience change people one experience at a time, but these co-collaborative experiences really have changed the way that I've worked. We're gonna ask that last question that Jesse loves so much, but I'll ask you first. If you had to show these experiences to a single individual, who would you put the headset on and why?
I want to answer this in two parts, because I think I have something to bring. I want to bring the audience some value, and I think I have something that could bring you some value, and then in that I'll answer this question also. When we talk about VR, like I told you, I'm very new to VR, and I didn't really understand completely, even as we were filming, the experience, what it was like. I had never done it before. But now that I've had some time, and especially now that I've been here at this conference, and I've experienced all of the different things that VR has to offer, I want you as creators to know the impact that this medium has. I want you to know that somewhere in this country there's a kid whose name you will never know, who will never be on the front page of a newspaper, who is going to go home after a day of being bullied at school, and they're going to put on this headset to escape the weight of their day. And they might stumble across this piece or another piece that one of y'all creates, and it's going to resonate with them. And instead of timing a suicide note to post on Tumblr the next morning and stepping in front of a semi-truck, they're going to take off that headset, and they might take that headset to their mom and say, "Mom, put this headset on. I want you to see this thing." And the mom's going to watch it. And the mom's going to take it to the dad, and the dad's going to watch it. And then pretty soon the whole family will, instead of ostracizing, rejecting this young child, they're going to love him. So don't for 1 second underestimate the impact of this work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That means a lot. It really does.
Yeah, you might not get an award, but you're never going to see a name, because that kid's going to grow up to be a healthy, happy, well-adjusted human being, because we love them and they love themselves. And so to answer your question, if I could show this to one person, and I'm going to be real with you, I would show it to my mom, because she needs to see it.
Yeah. I'm going to show it to my mom. How about you, Jesse?
I mean, you stole my answer, Shannon. No, I think what, in a lot of ways, if I could build a time machine, I would show it to you, to Aiden, to Acton 10 years ago. And for you to see how living authentically really looks like. Because I think so many times in the conversations we've had, it's hard to see what's in the future when you're so stuck in the present. And if this could be a tool for each of you to somehow see that light come faster, that would be a dream. So build a time machine.
You're doing it. You've done it for
It's on the roadmap. We're good. Just kidding. Jeremiah, how about you?
Yeah, so for me, I think that I would want to show my in-laws. I'm still fairly close with my ex-husband's family, and they're conservative Christians and huge Donald Trump supporters. And for the most part, like, they really love me, but not, they haven't really seen too many other transgender people besides myself. And so I think that's who I want to get in the headset. And I think with this project and it being in a VR, one of the things that has happened a lot, which I didn't expect, was that so many people want to see these videos, not particularly because of the content, and so because of it's in VR. And so I think that the VR technology has given me the ability to be able to show a lot of people who I think wouldn't normally want to see these videos. And Shannon and I were talking a little bit before this, and thinking about the work that I do, that a lot of times I'm like showing up and like demanding that people see trans stuff, or like educating employers and stuff like that. And so I think that was what's really cool about the VR, is that people a lot of times want to use the technology, and it just so happens that that's the content we have in it, and so they're able to watch it. Yeah.
I think we're almost out of time, but I was going to say that I recently read that someone said that a single perspective is the enemy of reality, and I do think that infinite perspectives might be the ally of VR, and that the big call to action is tell more stories, tell vast stories, share those stories with as many people as you can, and see what the power of good comes out of VR. So I'm just going to thank the panel. Everyone's going to be over at the developer meet and greet on the show floor, so you guys can see all this content as well as the other Creators Lab content as well. So I suggest that you take the opportunity to meet these amazing human beings and the other folks in the audience who have been creating things for Creators Lab. But thank you guys so much for being so authentic and, well, friends. I appreciate it.
Thank you.